and welcome back. Another sad note, we are remembering Judge Randy Parro, and joining me now, the Chief Justice of the Louisiana Supreme Court, John Weimer. Chief Justice, good to have you on today. How are you, sir?
I am sad today, Martin, as a result of the loss of Randy Parro. It's a sad day for his family, a sad day for his many, many, many friends throughout the region, and a sad day for the judiciary. He was a very fine and outstanding judge.
And also joining me is very well-known attorney here in the area, Mr. Harold Block. Mr. Block, thank you for coming on today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Martin. John was saying it is a sad day. Randy not only had wonderful friends and associates and lawyers and judges and so forth. He just was an outstanding man and will be sorely missed.
Now, the last time I had both of you on, we were talking about the Supreme Court justice and the swearing in of Chief Justice John Weimer. Of course, different circumstances today, but Chief Justice, if we could start with you, what did Randy Parro mean in your life, and sort of take us through memory lane? When was the first time you met him, and what was he like?
Well, Martin, I remember Randy from the time that I was about 15. He's 11 years older than me. I was working in my father's service station, and Randy was a very good customer of my father. And whenever Randy visited the service station, he and my father would chat at length, and I would listen and not contribute so much as a syllable to their conversation. He was a good-looking guy. He was always meticulously dressed. He had this wonderful smile. He laughed easily. And, I just thought he was a really great guy, although I was too bashful to talk to him. And he actually told a story when I took the oath of office to become an associate justice on the Supreme Court. He said that I had my car serviced at Weimer's Auto Repair Service and Supply. And when I went to pick up my vehicle, this long-haired, skinny, filthy, greasy, grimy, dirty kid crawled out from underneath my car. And he told me about the services rendered on my vehicle. And then he said, this guy very bashfully asked me a question: what does one have to do to become an attorney? And I looked at this guy and said, now here's a guy that's going to need an attorney one day. He will never, ever be an attorney. 11 years later, he was kind enough, along with Harold's brother Gerald, to hire me to work in his law firm. And we began a long-lasting professional career. Randy and Gerald, Harold's brother, were both in my wedding, so they were standing right there next to me at the most significant, important time of my life, the day I got married, very fortunately, to my wife, Penny. And Randy and I, continued to maintain a wonderful relationship. I became a teacher at Nichols, and he convinced the Supreme Court to appoint me to serve as a district judge. I was later elected as district judge, and then I joined him as an appellate court judge. And subsequently, I tried to convince him to run for the Supreme Court, and he convinced me to run for the Supreme Court instead.
In the green room, Chief Justice, we were talking about, and I think you mentioned the word meticulous. And Mr. Block, you mentioned the same word, meticulous. So it must be true. He must have been a meticulous person.
Well, Martin, I think I mentioned to you in the green room that Randy had an engineering degree. In my experience, engineers tend to be people who are very capable of studying minute things and making calculations that are within 100 decimal points and that sort of thing. And Randy had many, many talents, but that was one of his talents. He graduated with an engineering degree from Georgia Tech University, which is an unusual background for an attorney and for a judge, but Randy had that background. And everything he did meticulously. He was very cautious and careful about his decisions. He was cautious and careful when he was an attorney, and he and I practiced law together for some period of time in representing people. He always wanted to be exactly correct, and sometimes to the point of distraction, but when he did it the right way. He never cut corners. He never took the easy way out. He always was well prepared when he was an attorney and well prepared when he was a judge. I can remember early on in his judicial career, some of the older attorneys who had been doing things one way for a long time and possibly not the right way, when they would submit their succession papers to Randy, Randy would say it has to be redone because it doesn't follow code article such and such. And I can tell you the attorneys were not pleased. The older attorneys were not pleased and not happy, but that was Randy. If you were going to do it, you did it right.
Right. So he was almost like a professor on the bench. He was teaching people how to do things the right way.
Absolutely. That is the case. Now, again, sometimes it can be distracting and upsetting, but he maintained that it had to be done one way, the right way. And again, I think most people appreciated it.
Yeah.
A verb actually developed utilizing his last name, because judges on the Court of Appeal generally sit in 3-judge panels, and they exchange the opinion that one of them writes, and the other judge will do backup on it, and the other judge will back up the other 2 judges. And at the First Circuit, when I got there was actually a term in use called payroad. His last name became a verb. And he looked at people's opinions so carefully and red marked them and made editorial suggestions and corrections that they began calling anybody that did anything like that having your opinion payroad. And it's a term that is still occasionally heard at the various courts, because he was so meticulous, as Harold said, and so had so much attention to detail and minutia, but all in a good spirit, because the opinions need to be precise.
But let me ask you, and of course you're the Chief Justice now, so you can answer from a different perspective as Mr. Block. But so when attorneys were appealing something to Judge Parro, he really made their game step up quite a bit, and he probably made a lot of people better attorneys, didn't he?
He made attorneys better, and he made some judges better, or at least look better on the opinions that he corrected for them. His opinions were precise. They were well-written, well-reasoned. I spoke to my law clerks this morning, and Raul Escobar, who now serves as executive counsel to the Supreme Court, mentioned that Randy's opinions always reflected his engineering background. They were precise, concise, detailed, and well-reasoned and practical also, all at the same time.
Never heard of a judge or an attorney, like you said, who had a engineering background. What was he? Maybe the only one, or were there ever any more like that?
Well, I think there are other attorneys who have engineering backgrounds, but they're few and far between. But Martin, I think one of the things we need to touch on in remembering Randy was also just a great guy. He was a fun person to be with. He had friends all over the world. Although it little to do with being an attorney or a judge, he was one of the best dancers I ever saw in my life. He liked to have a good time. He truly believed in working hard and partying hard. And like I said, he was just a great guy to be with, and wonderful friend. So, I mean, there were many aspects to Randy over and above and beyond either being an engineer, being an attorney, being a judge. He was just a great guy.
Hey, let me ask Chief Justice Weimer something, and maybe get Mr. Block's input as well. But I know you attorneys, when y'all get together, especially as you become judges, and of course Mr. Block helped run a lot of y'all campaigns as well, when y'all get together, y'all want to talk a lot of legal jargon stuff, but you guys really knew how to have fun, didn't you?
Well, I refuse to answer on the grounds it might tend to incriminate me. All of us have taken a solemn oath not to talk about a lot of things that we did back in the day. But Harold's correct. Randy had a magnificent ability to be taken very seriously as a judge, but he was very serious about having a good time also. Yeah. And people loved him. The Parro stories are legendary of various antics and things that he did. But as Harold said, at the core of it, he was a good person, a good man, and a good time. He was quite possibly one of the original wild and crazy guys. But he was never hurtful towards anyone. He was, people just gravitated to him because they knew outside of work that he thoroughly enjoyed being with people, enjoyed their company, loved to talk to everybody, and he would speak to anybody on any topic until he got to know who their grandma was, their grandpa, their aunts, their uncles, and every relative and friend they ever had, until he could make a connection with them in some fashion.
Yeah, let me ask Mr. Block. In other words, I met him several times and spoke with him several times, but statesman comes to mind too. He handled himself very well.
Oh, he did. Martin, he did that in everything he did. I mean, let's go back to when we were growing up. Randy was a great football player. He played football for Thibodaux High School. My memory is he was the captain of the football team. Then he went on, and of course he was a great scholar and a great engineer from Georgia Tech. But he loved people. As John Weimer was just saying, Justice Weimer was saying, he wanted to know everything about a person when he met them, so he could have as many points of contact as possible. And, again, that meticulous personality, I would get so tired listening to who somebody's great-great-great-grandfather was when I was with Randy, but he wanted to know the whole chain, going back to Adam sometimes. Wow. And of course, he knew everybody. Everybody knew Randy. And as Justice Weimer said, everybody loved Randy. I mean, he was a great, fun guy to be with. And there's stories we cannot tell that we can laugh about when we're in private. But Randy knew how to have a good time, and the people with him had a good time.
Well, I tell you what, the oath that you attorneys and judges have is incredibly strong, because I can't breach it. But Justice Weimer, let me ask you, maybe if you could just pick one thing that Judge Parro or advice he gave you during the years that stands out, what would it be?
Martin, it wasn't so much advice that he gave me, but he always pushed me to do different things and to try different things and to extend myself. And, but for Randy, I would have never ended up serving on the Supreme Court. But for Randy, I never would have become a judge. The time that I was appointed to the district bench initially, Randy called me and asked me if I would allow him to submit my name to the Supreme Court to serve in his position on the district bench after he got elected to the Court of Appeal. And I declined. And a couple of days later, he called me back and told me I had to do it. Mm-hmm. And long story short, he convinced me to do so. And as luck and fate and circumstances would have it, I was able to, some years later, run for a position on the district bench, and then join him on the Court of Appeal, where we had a chance to work together. I pay-wrote a few of his papers. He pay-wrote a few of mine.
Right.
But we never had a cross word throughout our life. As a matter of fact, one day he called me and asked me if I would marry him. And I said, well, Randy, I appreciate that show of affection, but you're not what you call my type. And he said, I don't want you to marry me. I want you to perform the ceremony. And I said, well, I thought that's what you were asking, but that wasn't the question you posed. And so I told him never to tell anybody that I married him. They were all welcome to tell everyone that I married his wife, Michelle. Yeah. But I asked Parro to always say that I performed the ceremony.
Hey, let me ask you, Mr. Block, what was the story? And I know we talked about it when Chief Justice Weimer was getting sworn in, but was there a deadline or a wreck on the way to swear? And what happened?
Well, I think John can tell that story better than I can because he was there. But as I heard it, they managed to beat the deadline by 2 or 3 minutes. But I think it really would be appropriate for Justice Weimer to tell that story because I wasn't there.
All right, we're going to turn it over to the Chief Justice.
At 3 o'clock on the day that qualifying closed, I was working on some opinions in my office, and coincidentally, Randy and my wife both called simultaneously and suggested that I could best serve if I was on the Supreme Court. And they both appealed to my sense of service. Long story short, we began driving to Baton Rouge, and there was a wreck on the interstate, and Judge Parro was able to convince the state police to allow him through, and we arrived at the Secretary of State's office with 3 minutes before qualifying closed, and I was able to join the race at that time. But for his ability to maneuver around a wreck on the interstate, because I think he probably knew some of the state police, I would have never have made it, and my life history would have been different, certainly.
No doubt. Let me ask you this, Mr. Block, he talks about his persuasiveness, but in all the times I met him, I never got that as being dominant. But was it a hidden talent of his, or did he use it when he needed to?
Well, I think Randy just had a winning personality, and I think he got people to do what he wanted them to do by simply winning them over. I don't think he force-fed anybody. I don't think he came on strong with anybody. He was just a fun guy. He was he had a wonderful personality. He was fun to be with, and he could convince people to do things that maybe weren't always in their best interest, but if it meant having fun, Randy would want you to do it, and he could convince you to do it. As I said, I don't remember him ever coming on strong or anything like that, but he oftentimes got his way, which could lead to trouble on occasion.
Mm-hmm. And I know it's a code, and once again, attorneys and judges, most judges know all the attorneys. I mean, y'all all serve together or practice together. But, you know, when you're talking about learning from someone and them learning from you all, and I'll go back to the Chief Justice, what do you take from your entire relationship with Randy Parro? And I know y'all working probably on the eulogy now. What's the important things you would want people to know?
Well, certainly that he was someone that worked very, very hard. And the people that knew him in a social setting, I believe they thought that that's all there was to Randy Parro. But those of us who had the chance to work with him and see his dedication and devotion, I don't think I ever passed his office on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday night that he wasn't at his office working. Most nights he was at his office working. So that sense of devotion, that sense of dedication and devotion to your career as a judge. Every day we make so many important decisions that impact people's lives. And he took that oath very seriously and always worked very hard to do what the law directed him to do and what was right. And I believe that's probably the most important thing that I learned from Randy. I also learned how to balance your life. Serious he was about his work, he was just as serious as that about having a good time. He had very few hobbies, if any, but he was devoted to his work and to his family and to his friends. And he made friends easily, and he kept them all for life. And that's what we're all going to miss greatly.
We were talking prior to the program, and you mentioned to me and reminded me, and I'll let you start the conversation off about one of the biggest tax bases for Lafourche Parish became a loop. And Judge Parro was involved in that. I'll let you start that conversation. I know Mr. Block can add to it, but I mean, that was a big deal when you look at the future of Lafourche Parish.
Martin, you're absolutely correct. When Randy got out of law school, he came back to Thibodaux to practice. And then he went to work for Congressman Pat Caffrey. And after Congressman Caffrey left Congress, Randy began working with P.J. Mills. P.J., as I recall, and Harold probably knows better than I, was, I believe, the director of what was called the Superport Commission, and Randy was the assistant director. And that ultimately led to congressional action to locate a superport off the coast of the United States in deep water. And that ended up being located just outside of Port Fourchon. And it's called LOOP, the Louisiana Offshore All Port. And it's where these super tankers and super duper tankers come in and discharge the oil and the gas and the other fuels that run this nation to be sent on to refineries. And that is a tremendous, tremendous economic engine for this entire region, particularly Lafourche Parish, because Loop, as I recall, the last time I looked, was the largest taxpayer in Lafourche Parish. And that's gone on for many, many decades now. I've been a judge for 25 years, and I believe that was started in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on the date. But, that is a wonderful tribute to the work of Randy and P.J. Mills and many, many others. He graduated from law school with John Breaux and Billy Tozan, and they remain fast friends throughout their careers. I spoke to Billy yesterday. He was terribly saddened by Randy's passing, and he said, I'm going to contact Senator Breaux immediately upon the conclusion of our conversation to share the sad news also.
And I'm going to come back to Mr. Block, and then I'll come back to the Chief Justice for final words. But just your final thoughts on Judge Parro and what he meant to you.
Well, again, it's hard to put into a few words what Randy meant to me, because I can remember Randy back when we were early young teenagers and going forward from there. And we just were always friends from day one. He was my sister's age and was often at our house, and just know, Randy's one of those people I've known all my life, and he and I practiced law together. And the Superport was the early '70s when Randy was assistant director, and I think what Randy brought to the Superport and Luke was that he had been in Washington for 2 or 3 years with Congressman Caffrey, and they needed some legislation to put the loop together and the Superport together. So Randy knew the ins and outs in Washington. P.J. Mills, I think, was pretty much a Louisiana type guy, and he handled things locally, and Randy, I think, handled the Washington aspects. And then Randy and I and my brother started practicing law together. So we were friends. We were law partners. I just remember Randy as a guy who was always fun to be around, who, as John said, took his work very seriously, and was a hard worker, but enjoyed life too. I mean, he was not just a grind, not someone who just worked all the time. When he was playing and when he was having fun, he was doing that with great enthusiasm. And I'll miss him. You know, he was one of my closest friends.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Block. And Chief Justice Weimer, your final words?
You know, we've talked a lot about Randy's work ethic and Randy's willingness to play hard as he worked. But I think his greatest legacy is his children. Like he has 3 daughters. Liz is a physician. Leslie is a dentist. And Caroline is an attorney. All of them are very attractive. They are all good people, like their daddy. They don't have quite as much foolishness in them as their daddy does, but they're accomplished. And his greatest legacy, I think, will be those who are left behind, including his wife, Michelle, who during a very, very difficult illness never wavered in her love and support of Randy, as did his family. His sister, Carol, was there daily taking care of him. Wonderful family, wonderful people. He leaves behind a legacy of a great family, a number of grandchildren, and many, many friends. I've gotten calls from all corners of the state expressing their sadness at Randy's passing. Judges from all over the state knew him well, and as I said, gravitated to him because he was so much fun to be around. But yet, he was serious about getting his work done.
You mentioned all these legacies, but isn't Chief Justice John Weimer part of that legacy? Because him, along with Mr. Block, I don't want to use the word push. They saw it in you to be, a Supreme Court justice. But so couldn't you include yourself in that legacy? He'd be proud of that.
Well, Morton, I thank you for saying that, and that's awfully kind, and I would suggest very overly generous. I am a poster child for being in the right place at the right time, but being blessed with a lot of very close and dear friends that often saw something in me that I did not see in myself, including that group, former HTV personality Jimmy DeGate, Randy, Harold, so many other people that I was in undergraduate school. If I started naming all of those people, I would embarrass myself by forgetting one or the other. But I don't consider myself to be a legacy. I consider myself to be a very dear friend of Randy Parro, who altered my career path on numerous occasions.
Chief Justice Weimer, we appreciate it. And I know Mr. Block wants to say a couple of words.
Well, Martin, I appreciate you having this program today in memorializing Randy. He truly was an outstanding citizen of not only Lafourche Parish and Thibodaux, but also the state of Louisiana. He made some important contributions, as we've discussed today, to both the region and the state and the nation, truly. When you consider Loop, I think, imports 25% of all the oil that's imported into the United States. His effect on the judiciary, his decisions, his solid reasoning and practicality. He moved the judiciary forward in Louisiana. So he made many contributions that we can all be proud of, that his family can be proud of. And again, I just will always remember him as a dear friend.
Yeah. And Chief Justice, I don't want it ever said that Martin Folse did not give the Chief Justice the last word. We appreciate you being here, and I'll let you sign off for us today.
Martin, it's a sad day for the many friends of Randy Parro and his family also, but we have to celebrate his life. And it was a wonderful life, a life of hard work, of dedication, but he certainly enjoyed himself when he had his work done. Once his work was completed, he had a wonderful ability to let loose and let his hair down and cut up and have fun. And there are very few people that have that innate ability to do both and do it both very seriously. And thank you, as Harold said, so very much for giving Randy a few moments of airtime. What a good citizen, what a good friend, what a good person. And Martin, we thank you so much for all that you do for the community also.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Justice. We appreciate what you do for us. And Mr. Block, is always good seeing you again.
Good seeing you, Martin.
And Judge Randy Parro, gone but never forgotten, will always be remembered. So we'll take a short break. We'll be back with a lot more right here on HTV.